We've been married for 2.5 years now.
Okay. 2.5 years. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, thank
That,
you.
that's fantastic. Okay. So you've, one of the things that I'm going to ask the hardest question first, I think. This is what I would consider the hardest question if I was in your shoes. And I think most visionaries will too. So your topic, the untapped potential of great relationships. Um, my worry and fear of if I were to be a therapist and I were to talk about healthy relationships is crap. What happens if my relationship falls apart?
Mhm.
And how do I stay centered and authentic with my audience when I've never seen a marriage that doesn't have the good, bad, and the uglies going on.
Mhm.
Right? It's a hard thing. So how do you deal with that as the founder of the Successfully in Love method, and what gives you your reassurances and the self assuredness that you got this method figured out? Is that a
Yeah,
fair question?
yeah, it's a good question. And I think I used to worry about that. I think
Mm.
right at the very beginning, I started the business and I was like, oh my goodness, people are going to think that I'm a fraud because I called off my first engagement and clearly I failed at that. And I'm a terrible relationship coach. And then Yeah, and then every time my husband at the very beginning, when we would have our arguments, we were in the power struggle stage and it was difficult. And sometimes I'd be crying and then I'd come onto a client coaching call the next day and I'd be thinking, oh, am I a hypocrite? Like, what is this? And then ultimately, I realized the healthiest and the best relationships will have had a moment in time where they had a lot of conflict. That is literally the hallmark of being in a relationship. And a lot of couples, I think it was Terry Real. Terry Real shared his own arguments and disagreements with his wife. He's one of my favorite relationship
Mm.
therapists out there.
Thank you for that.
And I was
Keep
like,
going. Keep going.
yeah, and I remember hearing the level of volatility in his conflicts, and I was like, my goodness, we are like angels, my husband and I. We never swear at each other, we never call each other names. The worst thing that happens is he raises his voice ever so teeny weeny slightly, and I might cry. Right, that's about as bad as it gets. Um, and so as I began to dig into it, some of my favorite teachers, John Wineland, I trained under him. He's been divorced, and he's been single for a lot of his time. I looked at, yeah, just how many teachers have struggled in relationship. And I think what I kind of concluded was if you haven't struggled, if you haven't been to the depths of despair, if you haven't gone through a divorce or called off an engagement or gone through really difficult times, how can you possibly help other people? There's not going to be that level of empathy, right?
No.
So, yeah, I don't have that fear at all. And I think if, God forbid, anything ever was to happen to me and my husband, it's just part of a normal journey. I mean, not all relationships are meant to stay together. And the hallmark of success in a relationship
Mm.
shouldn't be longevity because, again, it depends on what the purpose is, right? If you're planning to have a family and to have kids, absolutely, you probably want to have some longevity in there for the stability of the kids. But even then, half the time when I'm working with people who are in a relationship and they're clearly misaligned for each other, longevity is not the hallmark of success. To me, it's like, how quickly can you split? How quickly can you get out of this mess and actually free yourselves? So I just don't think that relationships is kind of cookie cutter thing where everyone's, Disney princess happy and lives happily ever after. I think the reality is that humans are living longer than they've ever lived these days, and monogamous relationships really aren't actually built to last all that long. And it's pretty
Interesting.
normal. It's pretty normal to have breakups. It's pretty normal to have
Well,
challenges.
it's super normal. It's very rare to have the longevity aspect. So
Absolutely.
I loved everything that you said up until that part where obviously it passes my comfort zone. I shouldn't say obviously, but for me, the how quickly can you split? And I'm not
Yeah.
challenging that actually as much as like, oh, that's an interesting thing to explore. But you called it the hallmark. My second question for you in relation to that, trying to see the perspective, right, is well, wait a second. Um, is there like a secondary or a sub or a harmonious hallmark that goes along with that? Where what if you don't want to split? Right? What if you do want that longevity to last? I love that you don't put the emphasis on it. That's
Yeah.
neat. Like it's like, okay, if I'm living for the future, then I'm usually
Yeah.
missing the reality of the
Yeah.
present and
Yeah.
what's here. So I like the balance on that. But for those who are hoping to have an enduring relationship.
Yeah.
Do you see that as something that's negative and impractical, or do you see what would be the signs that a relationship is headed towards that enduring nature?
Good question. A lot of my clients come from very traditional and often quite religious backgrounds, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they will have married quite young, and they will be coming to me about 10, 15 years into their marriage or into their relationship. And I have a couple right now, they're coming to me 27 years into their relationship. And they're very candid that the past 8, 10 years have been really, really, really hard. Maybe even 15 years. I had a client who came to me in 15 years have been really challenging. And when I ask, what's keeping you together, it becomes very clear that there's very little friendship at this point. There's very little in common from a perspective of values. Really, the only thing keeping them together is kids or principle, right? The principle of we made this commitment, we now have to stick together because in the eyes of God, it's going to look terrible if we break up.
Right.
To me, that's a terrible waste of life. If it is very clear, I'm not saying that you walk away from the beginning. Of course not.
I'm with you. It's like,
Right.
well, there's the justification of, oh, I'm supposed to endure or be fully diligent with this, but in reality, you're using obstinance or arrogance as a means to keep it together, and you're calling it a virtue. So I'm with you on that.
And there's to your point, there's kind of like hubristic element of I'm gonna go against what the signs from universe, God, whatever it might be, are clearly showing me.
Right.
So I am a big believer that you want to get professional help. You want to throw your all into it and do your best and give it a boundary, right? 6 months to roll your sleeves up and do your best to work on the relationship with a professional is more than enough time to see if you're going to have any traction and if things are actually getting better, if you're moving the needle. If it becomes very clear, as I've seen with a couple of couples, that actually you're two very different people and you both feel very trapped by each other. And really, at the age that you're at, with how deep and how bad the resentment has got to, with all of the differences between you, to try to kind of connect at this point and rebuild, it's almost like a square peg, round hole. Not saying it can't be done,
right?
But is it not fair to say that there could be someone even better out there for you, where you could have an even more rich and abundant and happy life, and your kids would see you happier, right? And there's something just a little bit, I absolutely believe I could have stayed with my ex-fiance and probably made it work. Were we the best match for each other? No. Value-wise, we weren't. Am I a much better match with my husband? Yes. And actually, I met him, months after leaving my ex-fiance. It happened very, very quickly. That alignment kicked in, and I married my husband so quickly because the connection was so clear, right?
Yep.
The friendship was so deep. So, yeah, I just think you want to try. You want to do your best. But there has to be a healthy amount of I'm not going to try and bludgeon this into submission,
Right.
because who am I to do that?
I love the way the centered and balanced nature of how you talk about it. And you talk about it from a perspective of this, that's not necessarily the recipe that can happen for everybody.
Yeah.
And I'm going to double down on that side, not
Yeah.
to juxtaposition in a negative way. In fact, to honor what you said first, one of my favorite books is Boundaries of Marriage. Right. I needed to learn those boundaries big time. We didn't have a full understanding of that in my first marriage. And I very quickly accidentally found my second wife. I was just in a language learning app, learning with people worldwide, and we happened to meet. Then as conversations took off, we ended up coming together. That led to a marriage that I loved and try to honor. And the mother of my child, I strive really hard to honor our relationship as well. But I can't silence the reality that I went through so many black eyes and bloody lips, in the process of trying to protect the sanctity of my relationship with my youngest child. And trying to make sure that this new Cinderella experience we were in too, with somebody who was a stepmother to my other 3 children, it can be that the fairy tale does not always happen, that way, where it's like, oh yeah, it's cool. Like, we had the friendship side, but there's complications related to our circumstances, our cultures, that made it very difficult for us to have a healthy integration. And so those of you who are parents out there, I don't think Katarina's point or mine is to belittle in fact, I would never belittle the sanctity of marriage and the sacred nature of the process of building and what I would call an eternal family. That's super important to me. It's just really sad to me how many people are in that type of powerful commitment. The commitment is strong, but the rest of the virtues are like missing.
Yeah.
It's like, how are you going to do that if you're not, if you're drinking, smoking, doing other things in your life, cheating, like if you're so distracted by everything else in life, but you're committed to this eternal bond, like there's an incredible imbalance there, and it can certainly lead to a worse environment for the children.
Yeah.
But I will caution, my friends that are married, divorce when you have kids, you have no idea how complicated it is. You have literally zero. If you haven't been through that, you have no idea the hell that you will go through. And the silver lining of walking through the fires of hell is you also become refined. You learn a lot about life. And to your point, Katarina, you become more useful to others in the world too, because now you have new experiences that help you empathize with others. So I am not a relationship expert by any way, shape, or form, but it fascinates me to be able to meet with people like you, because we all need a ton of help with our relationships and maximizing the strength of the relationships. So we're gonna come back. We're gonna do two things. We're gonna talk about the 3 resources you recommend for visionary leaders, because you're a fast study. You've gotten to where you are at a pretty young age. How old are you?
35.
35. Yeah, we're both young. I'm 37. I feel like I'm in the infancy of life, where I realize, wow, I really didn't know anything for the last 30 years. So now I'm starting to discover things. So I'm excited to hear about those. We'll take a break, and then we'll come back and talk about that untapped potential of the great relationships outside of marriage too. This will help with all relationships. And we'll do as much as we can in the little time that we have. But Katarina, first, what are the 3 resources that you recommend for other people building visions out there?
3 resources as in that I can help with, or 3 bits of advice?
No, that have gotten you to where you are. So if it is your book, that's fine too, or your movie or whatever it is. But the 3 that will help them build to where they're going.
Yeah, absolutely. I think number 1 is understanding your internal wiring, right? So for me, when I really began to drill down into attachment theory and understanding what are the stories in my head, how do I process information, what projections am I delivering onto my partner, onto my relationships, how am I wired, right? How do I attach to people? All of these questions really help me understand myself and help me understand where am I getting in my own way, and how am I negatively contributing to the problems in my life when it comes to my relationships. That was number 1.
That's awesome.
Yeah, because that's what you can control. Number 2 was learning how to work with the subconscious mind. So learning how to work with the subconscious mind has probably been the biggest game changer in my own journey to becoming securely attached, and into my own journey to having a healthy, happy marriage. The more I can understand, again, my wiring, and then work with that to change that, to optimize it, the faster my relationships improve. I can tell you now that the difference between where I was with my ex-fiance, where I was pretty anxiously attached and pretty anxious,
Guilty.
and ruminating and overthinking and projecting and feeling abandoned a lot of the time, and kind of testing him and being quite critical and having these very explosive arguments. And really, when I look back at that version of myself, I'm like, my goodness, who was I? And not to say that the relationship was perfect. The relationship had tons of problems in it, but I think now if I was to experience that again, it would be so different, right? Because when I called that engagement off, that's when I decided to really roll my sleeves up and take ownership, because I was like, this sucks. I'm in my early 30s and I really wanted to have a family. I wanted to have kids. And I was like, what do I do now? Like, I just call this off. And how am I ever going to find love? And I did the map on the timeline of, well, if I'm 31 now, like, there's no way in hell that I'm going to meet a partner and have the time to build a family. And I didn't know that I'd meet my husband literally months later, right? Like, I met him very, very quickly after. But the time between my ex-fiance and my husband, I was knee deep in doing this work. I was taking so much ownership and accountability. I was examining myself. I was studying myself. I was studying behavioral science. And I was really, really, really understanding how to recondition my brain to be more secure. And so that was like a big part of the practice. And that's been seminal in helping me actually deepen my relationship with my husband. So that's like the second thing.
It's amazing.
And then the third thing is learning to, this is so cliche, but learning
cliche, that's usually foundational. Go ahead.
It is learning to communicate, but it's not just about, like, don't use you statements, use I statements, but learning to learn, which is,
And not but.
yeah, it's like, that's really valid. I think it's more about getting into the practice of learning to be kind and radically honest, right? Because I found that the more,
Radical Candor, right? Great book.
Yeah, but in a kind way, right? And in a way that
that's the point of that book is you do it because you love, right? If you're giving feedback or talking conflict, it has, and it's from a position of love. So continue.
Exactly.
Please.
Exactly. The faster that you can nip things in the bud, right? And because, my husband and I, we look back in the past couple of years and we're like, we've had the wildest ride. We've moved countries 3 times in like 2 years. He's been unable to work for like 2 years because of bloody visa issues, which is why we're back in Canada now. Like, we've had financial pressures, we've had fertility issues, we've had like family stresses, the Ukraine war, my family's in Ukraine. So we've had like so much grief and heartache and stress. And I think we've been very candid that old us would never have survived this relationship. Never. But, we're just getting better. Like, literally, it was my birthday last week, and I was like, my goodness, like, our relationship only gets better and better and better, no matter how hard things are. And even this year started off rocky, and he dislocated his bloody shoulder a week ago. But my point is that it's the fact that we're able to have that radical candor and nip things in the bud, and we have these regular relational practices where we practice communicating and being honest and being vulnerable with each other, that it's kind of like we keep cleaning things, we keep kind of polishing our relationship, right? So it doesn't get grubby, it doesn't get dirty, it doesn't build up with residue of resentment. Not to say that there hasn't been resentment, but it's like we're on it, and we're both taking accountability, and we're both kind of cleaning it, keeping it shiny.
I love that. That is amazing. Oh, hello. There's my amateur mistake for the day. Nice. So with that said, I want to go back to some of those. I'm going to do my best on this. So 1, healthy healing for your husband. Tough stuff with the shoulder. 2, happy belated birthday.
Thank you.
And 3, in the opposite side of the spectrum, blessings and best wishes to your family in Ukraine. That's a lot of emotion to be going through at one time. And the 3 principles that you just shared with us, they're out of this world important. They are fundamentals. I don't see them as cliche at all. I see them as important growth opportunities that instead of trying to feed us a fish, you're giving us the opportunity to go and explore this in depth for ourselves. The one that really struck me, all 3 of them, I'm going to be studying a lot about now this week and integrating it with the rest of my responsibilities, but learning how to work with my subconscious mind. There's so much opportunity to use ChatGPT, even, my friends, those of you listening, to start exploring how you can go about that and get a game plan. But then you've got people like Katarina, who she could have recommended thousands of books. She could have recommended tons of courses and people. And she recommended that learning concept for us. Why? Because she's so dedicated to doing that herself. Those are the types of people I like to then turn to and be like, oh, I got to grab on to Katarina and stay close, because as I continue to learn how to explore my own subconscious mind, it's friends, mentors, people who are on that path that can open our eyes up to how we can get even further into understand that. And once for me, if I can't have a great relationship with myself because I don't know myself well enough, then that's going to limit my capacity to have great relationships with others. So you've already shared a treasure trove of extreme value for all of us. I'll try to make the break really short. We'll come back and we'll dive in for all of you to know what else can you do to untap and the potential of your great relationships, even though we just had an absolute masterclass on it. And we'll see you guys all on the other side. All right. Welcome in to Vision Pros Live with Jackson Calame. I'm your show host. We will be doing interviews for visionary entrepreneurs and guest leaders who are building fantastic visions out there. What's up, everybody? It is Pajama Jackson, and I am back. I'll bring Katarina back on stage in just a minute. Welcome to Vision Pros Live. You guys know that we really appreciate authenticity here. If you didn't know that, you now know it. I just got back from Podfest. I have to give a huge shout out to that. That was the best expo I've ever been to, right up there with Kajabi and Icon. Those are also amazing expos. But what made it so special this time is we have a pretty large team now that was able to create a compound effect around our efforts. So we got to meet so many amazing people. I'm gonna get emotional about it, so I'm not gonna go into it. Podfest Expo. If you're in the podcasting world or interested in getting into it, I cannot recommend it enough. We were talking about boundaries in marriage just now, Katarina and I, as she just laid down so many amazing principles for how we can exercise in our own life, how to improve our relationships. And some of the relationships that are most important to me are the ones I want to tell you guys about. These sponsorships, by the way, they're not paid for sponsorships. These are just entities that I really love because they've done so much for me. And that's why I share them with you guys. The day that people do pay for that, I will still only let people do that whom I love and who will be important and helpful for this audience. So first off, we've got oportunidades de trabajo para Latinos, or opportunity. Sorry, I'm going to do that in English. Opportunities for Latinos. We have this program where we help Latinos. What we're doing is we're bridging the economic gap between North America, South America, and rest of the world. And we do that not through VA relationships. We call that virtual abuse. We do not believe in virtual abuse. We want to make sure that our team members are fantastic. We want to make sure that we're taking great care of them. And we teach them how to become what we call digital ambassadors. Most of these individuals have never heard of LinkedIn. They've never heard of podcasting. They've never heard of Canva, Upwork, Fiverr. They've never read Rich Dad Poor Dad. And we show them how they can create a career for themselves, or perhaps come in and work with us. And we've got an amazing podcast. That's cool. This page is brand new. I haven't seen that before. And so the team's doing so many great things to build out our brands in addition to the brands that we work with. And we try to get them placed with companies that are going to take care of them long term. They've interviewed people like Kike Ingles, who has 925,000 subscribers on YouTube. They're absolutely crushing my show as we speak. Luisa and Cynthia do an amazing job of hosting it. If you know a Latino leader or somebody who speaks Spanish that can go in there and inspire other Latinos to make the most out of life, that's what that program is all about. We would love to have you over there. Then there's Learn and Grow Rich with Zach Ullman. Zach Ullman has become a very good friend of mine. He runs his own program. It's so similar to ours, it's almost creepy. And he does things at a different angle than we do. We've brought Zach in as our chief financial officer. And the reason why he's our chief financial officer and yet has his own brand is because we needed to have a financial department that could help us scale with the hundreds of brands that we plan on supporting over time. His program's phenomenal. You're welcome to work with him and not with us. But we want you to be aware of the resources that are helping us shape the future of where first-class business is going. Lastly, there's the Water Project. I do not have any affiliation with the Water Project. We are a monthly contributor to this particular program. And I know that us talking about this is the most important thing that we can do to continue to move it forward. There are millions of people in this world that do not even have access to clean drinking water, something that I've taken for granted my whole life. And as I saw how transparent they are with their story, and saw how you get to pick the communities that you get involved with. And even if you just give $5, they will send you the social proof of that community's borehole well or sand dam or whatever they're creating for sustainable water for those individuals. And then you and I get to have this massive multi-generational impact for these families. As you see on the screen right now, these kids celebrate water even more than my kids celebrate Christmas Day. That is a very humbling thought and reality to think about these kids, how they have to travel for miles sometimes to just find a source of water, or the parents and how they have to leave work just to be able to provide the basic essentials for their families. You and I have the opportunity to make impact on that. So my hope is, if you're in a position where financially you just can't help right now, please think of somebody who you can share this message with and maybe talk about it over lunch or dinner. Maybe send a post out about it, specifically about the Water Project, because if we can solve that problem, we can help millions of people who do not have that solved for themselves right now. And thank you for taking time to hear that. Let's get back to helping you guys with your visions and untapped potential for greater relationships with Katarina Polonska. Thank you so much for being here, Katarina. Let's dive right into vision. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you. Yeah, I can't believe it's like the 20th of January.
Oh my goodness, this year is flying. It is absolutely huge. So yeah. I'm glad she's good, because we got started on like, you know what, I'm gonna ask the absolute hardest question I can first. And I never ever do that to guests, but there was something about you. There was just a centeredness and a balance that I was like, you know what? She's not just talk about these relationships. I think she's got the wherewithal, the strength to be able to dive into the harder topics and expand that vision. Then we can get back to the basics and the principles. So returning to the basics and the principles, who is it that you typically are helping, and what is your vision for the people that you serve?
Yeah, such a great question. I help two camps of people. So maybe I'll kind of shed light on both of them. I help singles and I help people in relationship. I'll start with the people who are in relationship though, because that's kind of my bread and butter, even though in one of my group programs, it's mainly singles. I help people, those who are in relationship, I help them individually as opposed to couples work, but generally individually. And I help them do that critical inner work to take ownership of their side of the street so that they can have a clean conscience and know with full certainty, I have done everything in my power to improve this relationship before I make any decisions. And so often people will come to me and they've been married or in a long-term relationship. And this question of, do I stay or do I go? I'm feeling lonely, I'm feeling unsupported, I'm feeling misunderstood, I may be feeling a bit trapped, but I don't want to make a rash decision. I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I don't want to make any mistakes. And I'm overwhelmed. I'm a little bit scared. I don't know where to turn to. I don't want to do couples counseling because I don't want to kind of put, gas on the fire, and I don't want to make things worse. I don't want to drag my partner anywhere.
Let me talk about that a little bit, because
Cool.
I've done a ton of couples therapy in 2 different marriages.
Yeah.
And one, it takes 2 to tango.
Yeah.
Right? But you both have to be willing to do it. And as good as therapists are and psychologists, just like doctors can perform malpractice is far more common in the therapy world. And it's not some evil conniving doctor. It usually comes from a position of ignorance. I had one of our counselors literally break down in tears during our conversation where, my wife was expressing the challenges of being in a relationship with me.
Yeah.
And after this 10-minute episode, after this 5 minutes of conversation, the therapist started to project back on us and say, my husband's like that too. I mean, he does this and this. She went off for 15 minutes.
Oh my goodness.
About her own self. Yeah, that is beyond unprofessional and uncertified. And that's the extreme version that we saw. But
that's quite harrowing.
It was oftentimes therapists who were kind of guessing, or they were distracted by the next appointment, and like wanting to wrap up, and like you could tell they're exhausted, and their business models are so broken.
Yeah.
That they're so worried about like their own selves that they don't quite show up with the same problem. So there are levels to, my point is there are levels. And if you're going to do couples therapy, and you just go over like the first person, or you pay something really cheap, then my challenge to those of you seeking therapy, realize you get out of it what you put into it. And if you don't put any research into the due diligence up front, you might end up with a guide that's fairly lackluster. So nothing against couples therapy, but maybe look at Landmark, maybe look at the Gottman Institute, just to give you a couple of resources.
I'm Gottman. Yeah.
Oh, very good. And so now I'd love for you to continue, but I just wanted to be a full supporter. I'm like, yes, be wise. If you want great relationships, be wise about who you get counsel from.
Yeah. No, and to your point, right? Like my first exposure to this was seeing my parents go through their divorce, and they were going to kill each other in the process financially, right? And the counseling was like kind of patronizing. It didn't land. I had my own couples counseling with my ex-fiance, and I don't know what progress we really made, other than I think we dragged out a relationship that frankly, again, shouldn't have been together from the beginning. And I think had we just been pulled aside and done our individual work to take ownership of our side of the street, we would have arrived at the conclusion that we're two fundamentally very different people with very different value sets. And actually one of us is growing at this level, the other one is growing at this level. We're just not meant to be. And that's okay. Let's not flog a dead horse, like it's just like, let's just accept it. Plenty of couples marry very young before they know who they really are, what they really need, what it takes to have a long-term relationship, right? They marry out of people-pleasing pressure, fulfilling parental obligations and duties, their own conditioning. And so often we can get into relationships where actually, we're not fully compatible, and that's okay. But to your point about the couples counseling, I had my own frustrations with that, because often it felt like, I understand in a lot of couples counseling, the job of the counselor is that the relationship is the client, not the two individuals, right? And so the goal of the counselor is to keep the relationship together at any cost. And so they will work really hard to keep that relationship going, which again, from where I'm standing, often doesn't lead to necessarily the healthiest of outcomes. And so in the work that I do, and what was so important to me was working with the individuals as sovereign individuals, getting real clarity from them of who are you? What do you need to be happy? Where do you want to go in your life? And then let's clear out all of your self-sabotage, all of your subconscious blockers. Let's make sure that you are feeling clear, you're feeling grounded, you're feeling secure. We've worked through your triggers. You've learned communication skills. You've learned how to navigate conflict. You've learned how to expand your emotional window of tolerance. And so then when we do, if we do, bring you into a room with your partner, it's going to be a very different type of conversation
Huge.
of here is who I am and here is who I am. And now let's have a civil conversation and start to work
I
through,
love that.
right?
I
And
cannot
to
tell
me,
you how much I love that. I love
it
it
makes so much
so
sense,
much. It
doesn't
does,
it?
because otherwise you got two people who have different listening capacities, right?
Different
Different emotional
triggers.
reactions
Yeah.
and different needs that they want to express that aren't prepared. And it's like we for some reason train our like ourselves to only go to counseling when like we're on fire,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Versus you're kind of creating this separate again strength. And then if I'm, like I wish more couples could see the opportunity of going to counseling in the good times,
Yeah.
right, and get
Yeah.
ideas and exercises for how to improve the relationship. It sounds kind of like
Absolutely.
you go that route, but go ahead and tell me more
Absolutely.
about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think what I always found in my work and what I experienced is that you're very rarely going to get two people in a relationship who are both like, yes, we want couples counseling. Normally it's only one person wants, the other person's like, what's wrong with you? I don't want this, right?
Yeah.
And so then you already have this imbalance where one person's dragging the other and the effectiveness is really diminished.
No.
And again, to your point, everyone's going to be triggered, already very dysregulated in their nervous system, and it's just going to be chaos. And from where I was standing, it felt like we were paying, not a crazy amount of money. It was like $250 or something, but it was still paying a lot. And in the session, it was so frustrating because in the session, everyone's saying the right things, everyone's on their best behavior, and you have all like the best intentions, but then you leave and you get back home and it's the same status quo. And from a behavioral science point of view, well, of course it is. None of the learning has been retained because we know that 75% of the learning is actually lost already in like a few hours, and like 90% is gone within the day, right? So learning retention is completely obsolete. From a subconscious mind perspective, when you're in the couples counselor room, you're only using 3% of your brain, 3 to 5% of your brain, your conscious mind. You're not tapping into your subconscious. You're not doing any subconscious mind work. So you can say all the right things. You can nod. You can please the counselor. You can, play the little perfect role. But again, when you go home, you're going to default back into the status quo, into your habits. So again, what I found was with that one person who would typically reach out to me like, hey, I'm not happy. I think I want to leave my husband, but I'm not sure. We've got kids. I don't want to make a mess out of this. I do love him. I just don't feel in love with him and I don't know what to do. Help me. And I'll be like, okay, cool. Let's you and I work together for 3 to 6 months, depending on how quickly we can do this. And let's look at how are you contributing to your own sense of disconnect in the relationship? What is your attachment style? How are you blocking yourself? How are you blocking your ability to receive his love? How are you actually self-sabotaging here? And let's make sure that we clean up your side of the street so that you can be like, okay, you know what? I'm feeling secure, I'm feeling confident, I'm feeling calm, and I see the relationship clearly. From that place, let's get clarity on who are you really and what is it that you need to be happy long-term in this relationship? Step 2, and then let's learn communication techniques and learn how to set boundaries and learn how to articulate your needs and learn how to actually develop intimacy with your partner and see how things are at that point. And normally what I will find in that work is that at some point, pretty early on, normally like 6 weeks in, the person I'm working with will start to show up in the relationship differently. They will be much more aware of their triggers. They'll be more aware of their communication style, be more aware of their own blocks. And so they become kinder to their partner. They become more compassionate. They start to take more responsibility. They start to regulate themselves more. They start to just be a different, more secure person, which typically the partner will recognize and feel. Often there'll be a little freak out of like, what the heck has happened to you? Who are you? You're different. At that point, there might be a conversation of, you know what? I've been really unhappy in our relationship, but I'm working with this relationship coach because I want to fix things. And that's when the other partner might freak out. Maybe they get their own coach. Maybe they reach out to me, whatever it is. But at that point, you've kind of got two people doing independent work. And I'm not saying that person even has to do independent work, right? Or it might look very different. But at that point, you've kind of started this bigger conversation. And that's where the magic happens. And I will tell you that I started this work kind of expecting the majority of couples to actually end up breaking up, because my hypothesis was if people are coming to me with this lens of should I stay or should I go, they're already kind of out the door.
Yeah.
That's not what's happened. 9 out of 10 couples that work with me, within 6 months, it's like they're in their honeymoon again. They're in love again.
Yeah.
I've got one woman who literally, I was helping her find a divorce lawyer, and she's trying for a baby with her husband now. So all of that to say, we get in our own way so much. And again, the people I work with are typically high achieving professionals, right? Who are like business owners or corporate professionals and pretty go-getting. You can bet that there's going to be some subconscious wounding there, because very often our ambition is coming from a wounded place.
Absolutely.
Right. And so let's just take care of that. I'm not saying you're going to stop being ambitious or anything, but let's just make sure that you are the best version of you before you make any big life-changing decisions about your relationship.
Yeah.
It's a win-win, right? It's a win. You're either going to leave being happier than ever before and find someone really quickly like I did, or you're going to stay and have a whole new relationship to enjoy.
And maybe it's not the quickly find somebody new, but perhaps it's the quickly feel centered and balanced in yourself.
Yeah.
Right. There's that side too. I want to say, I honestly believe that have we been working with you? You may have saved my first marriage. And I share that with full respect too for Jonathan Decker, formerly of yourfamilyexpert.com. I might have worn him out. I don't know. I have no idea why he no longer has the yourfamilyexpert.com anymore, but it was such a phenomenal resource. And he took an approach very similar to what you're doing, but we were trying so hard in that counseling together aspect that wasn't, there were still components missing. And I am grateful for the fact that our marriage dissolved. I actually am very grateful for that nowadays. And my kids will hopefully also be able to feel the honor and sacred nature of what I mean by that, and be able to learn from our experience how to have their healthiest, happiest selves, and how to be able to move towards having, a great long-term relationship for their lives, and get the counseling, the leadership, the experiences and knowledge necessary to build their best lives. So again, I want to respect the sacred nature of my first marriage, and again, what Jonathan Decker was able to give to us. But you've already been able to take things to a level that I have not found. And I have read a lot of books, been to a lot of therapists, worked with a lot of providers in this space, and most of which make noise, regurgitate principles, but they don't know how to tie it together and talk about the vision of what's possible the way that you were able to eloquently talk about. I'm going to double down on that. We will be very interested in learning more about this for the sake of the relationships within our brand and company. Everybody that I work with, right, becomes somebody who can either add energy to what we're up to, or will be somebody who will drain energy out of me, right, as a leader. And so I'm extremely aware of the need to tap into that potential great relationships, the opportunity that exists to raise the level of relationships that we have. So I am so grateful that you came across our path at this exact moment, like where we're at as a brand and what's possible, because the Successfully in Love method, that's something that now I'm like dying to hear about and understand. So what is the Successfully in Love method, and how does that work?
Yeah, great question. Successfully in Love method it took me a while to think about the name, because I was like, I want to talk about, all these successful professionals who are so successful in every arena of their lives, apart from their relationships. They want to be in love with their lives, right? You want to be in love with your life. You want to be in love with your work. You want to be successful in love. And the methodology is a 3-step methodology. So I've kind of broken it down into 3 big chunks. Chunk number 1 is the liberation phase. So I call it liberate. And that's where we work together to liberate.
Did you say celebrate?
Liberate.
Liberation, freedom phase.
Yes, exactly. We liberate you from all of your internal blocks, your self-sabotage, all of the different ways that you might be getting in your own way without realizing it when it comes to your relationship, right? So we look at your attachment style, we look at your communication, we look at your belief systems, we look at how are you, through no fault of your own, unfortunately, negatively contributing to the problem. And we're all doing that, right?
Yes,
We're all doing that.
absolutely.
So step one is like liberate. And that's where I start teaching the subconscious mind techniques, and I'm helping you go inside and clear all of that, right?
Here's a crazy insight. And God makes no mistakes. Maybe all of you have heard this before, but my buddy Matt, who I mentor with both directions, he used to work for me. He told me about his avoidant personality type. And out of all of the psychology books I've read, out of everything that I've watched, and I study like 6 to 10 hours of this per week, guys, I had never heard of the avoidant attachment and the anxious attachment until about 2 months ago. It's just crazy to me that I've never heard of this concept, and it is so wide and far, like it's so talked about in the psychology realm, yet I had never found it. So, continue, please.
Yeah.
That's so important to understand. Like I learned so much by diving into 1 week, like 6 hours on a Saturday, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so helpful. So please continue.
Well, I think exactly that, right? Like I found attachment theory a game changer just because of the way that it helped me compartmentalize and understand aspects of myself that felt like a lot of it didn't make sense, right?
Right.
So yeah, absolutely. A lot of this stuff. I'm an integrated attachment theory specialist. I'm having trained under the personal development school as well with Thais Gibson. So really like knee deep in that world. And so Liberate is all about liberating you from that. And my goal from the very beginning is to get you on the process of reconditioning your mind so that you are securely attached and you feel confident and clear in yourself. And that will allow us to then help you reconnect with yourself in a way that you've never connected before. Because when we are insecurely attached, when we're full of blocks, it's really hard to know, who am I really? We're kind of living an illusion, right? Like we're living in this well of insecurity. So once you feel worthy, once you feel good enough, once you feel loved and you feel accepted and you feel calm and peaceful and connected, then we can start to get really curious around what is it that you actually need? Who are you? Where is it you want to go in life? And once we understand the needs, then we go into the create phase 3. And that's all about how do we actually create healthy, productive strategies to get your needs met, both in the relationship and outside of it. So this work really does kind of go beyond relationships as well, right? Because a lot of this stuff will actually bleed into your career, bleed into your finances, bleed into your health. But the point is, it all boils down to you clearing those blocks and reconnecting with yourself. And in that create phase is when we might get clarity on, okay, I need more trust in my relationship with my husband because actually there was this betrayal that happened a long time ago that we never addressed and all this resentment's built up. So I will help you work through that resentment. I will help you clear all of that and liberate yourself from it. But then I'm going to get clarity with you on what is it that you need in order to repair that relationship with him fully. And then we're going to create strategies to actually get that done, right? So it's very practical. I think a lot of the work that I do, to your point, is for better or for worse, I'm quite a logical, analytical thinker, right?
Right. I see that.
And I know that relationships are messy.
Well, I'm gonna answer it myself one more time onto that because as I mentioned earlier, I honestly feel like you very well could have saved my marriage. I do think it would have been the missing link, and I don't think that would have been right for us. But what I'm noticing about you is you're more pragmatic about, you're not looking at that as the victory, right? You're not trying to force the issue that, oh, well, you guys now have to stay together. And that healthy mindset can scare people who have attachment disorder issues or who feel like, again, that the dogma is what should dictate their decisions. But you're not attacking the dogma. No. You're just making space for the well-being of the individual. Yes. And so I don't think you actually would have saved the marriage. I think you would have helped us see like how we had options. Right. And that's so neat because if somebody's got a predetermined outcome for what's best for the individuals, then they can't possibly guide based on the well-being of the individuals. So it's like I'm blown away by this.
Yeah. And I think that's to your point, right? I think that's the issue with couples counseling is that the client is the relationship. And again, when I think back to my own fiance, my ex-fiance, I think that there were definitely some like troubling behaviors that were unethical and, and really transgressed a lot of my value system and a lot of my kind of boundaries. And I think that they weren't for him, right? Because we had different value systems. And I think had I been working with myself back then, I probably would have said what my relationship coach said to me back then, which, she kind of painted the picture and she kind of mapped it all out for me, what my future would look like with this person. And she was just like, is it fair to say, based on this vision of your future that I have mapped out for you, that actually this is pretty incongruent with who you are, what I know of you to be. So where do you fit into this? And that's when I was like, oh my goodness, I'm self-abandoning because I'm anxiously attached. And then it all kind of clicked. And that's when I was like, so I can work on this relationship till the cows come home. I'm sure we can make it work. I'm sure we can make it work. I'm sure we can actually have a lovely marriage, lovely kids, have a lovely kind of day to day. But is that actually the highest, most kind of the highest place of integrity for me and who I am and my own unique contribution to the world? Probably not, because rapidly, literally within months, I met my husband now, and that led me into being so much more aligned with my vision, who I am, my career, my health, my finances, my kind of trajectory of where I'm going in life, where we're going in life. That it's like, this is my soul's purpose. And I think that's what I'm getting at, right? That we kind of, often we get into relationships for the wrong reasons, out of fear, scarcity, desperation, people pleasing, time is ticking.
Right. Call them in out, pleasure. Right. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And that isn't always going to be the best relationship out there. And I do believe that we all have multiple people we can have a great relationship with, but it's like you want to be connected on that deeper level. But yes, all of that to say that I think I appreciate relationships are messy. I appreciate that they don't all fit into these nice little boxes. And yet I still find it helpful to think things through in little boxes, because the people I work with are so logical and so analytical and KPI driven that often when we think about the world of relationships and marriage counseling, it is frustrating because you're kind of just floating in this murky mess going round in circles, which is what we felt. And it's like, no. That's just going to erode my confidence. I need a plan. I need to take control and ownership. And I need to be able to understand this intellectually to understand myself, right? And I think
there are other phases of the Successfully in Love method that we're not going to have time to get to today.
Oh,
and that's totally fine. No. Oh my gosh. Don't apologize. This is easily one of the best episodes we've ever had. Easily one of the best, one of the most important that the visionaries I work with, because if you've got a vision and you're meant to do major impact, you're going to need relationships by your side in order to do that. And so the more we can learn about building phenomenal relationships, the better. And as I teach my Latino team, when it comes to learning English, we got to find the best teachers in the world, because you can't be the best student in the world if you don't have the best teachers in the world. And I'm going to put you right up there on that pedestal with the best of the best teachers. This was phenomenal. So those of you who are listening in, make sure to, one, I skipped my absolute favorite question because we didn't have time, and I'm hoping that you'll come back. I know you've been on our show 3 times. You were with Javanka twice on the show, or at least y'all did 1 episode. We're going to be using this material for a very long time to help people with their growth and repurposing it, because again, the relationship dynamic is one of the most crippling dynamics for any visionary out there. And the more help they get on that, the better leaders they become and the happier we become in working with them on what they're up to. 2, I didn't get to ask you about the most powerful lesson you could share with the audience. So we will do that if we get to come back, and we'll dive into those phases. Those of you listening in, down below, you'll see the action steps. What actions can you take with Katarina in order to work in her program? We'll drop some information about the Successfully in Love method. We'll also, of course, put the resources on there that we talked about earlier, the coaches that she's working with, the institutes, learning how to work on your subconscious mind, etc. All that's going to be there. And then in the top right corner, those of you listening in that want to share your vision with us, you don't have to be a world-class leader like Katarina to do that. You can be at the beginning stages of putting your vision out there and talk to us. Just as be our guest, click the button to be our guest, and come have a meeting with our team. And let's get you on the show. Any final words you'd like to share? I'll let you wrap up, Katarina.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And I'd love to come back. Would absolutely love that. I think final words are that you and everyone out there deserves to have a really healthy, fulfilling, meaningful relationship where they feel safe, where they feel loved, where they feel chosen every single day. You can have that. You absolutely can have that, right? It might not be where you're at right now. It might not feel like it's possible, but it is. And all you need is the motivation to go out there and make it happen. And then just taking little micro steps and learning what to do. But it's a process, and you can learn a process. You really can.
I love that. I love that. Vision Pros, you heard it from Katarina. We will see you on the next episode of Vision Pros Lives. Thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to hearing your feedback. Thank you for being here today. I'm really happy that you tuned in to Vision Pros Live. I'm looking forward to seeing your reactions as these episodes continue to move forward. This is going to get more and more fun. We'll have more and more engagement as well. We'll invite people to participate in the show. And thank you for giving us your time and attention. Have an excellent time building out your